Peace and blessings, everybody. Saturday, December the 8th, the year 2018. This is simply me documenting history. It's documenting a piece of the puzzle, and you can take it for what it's worth. I was contacted today by Sam Friedman with the NewsMiner in Alaska. And if you type into your search engine, Sam Friedman, Alaska NewsMiner, Schaeffer Cox, you'll get a ton of articles. And you can tell that Sam Friedman has written a lot of articles on Schaeffer Cox. I would say that a lot of them have been biased and have not shown the truth of Schaeffer Cox's innocence. And so I have been disappointed with the NewsMiner in their reporting of Schaeffer Cox. Now, he called me today, and because Alaska and Texas is a one consent party state, and he called me in his official capacity as a reporter, I recorded the entire conversation, and you will hear it. And I'm also going to show you what I sent to him in the first 10 minutes after we hung up the phone, so that you'll know exactly the same conversation that I had with him, and you'll see exactly the information that I sent to him. So you'll know exactly what he has. Therefore, when you read whatever article he writes, you'll know the full, unedited, raw information that at least I had with him. And I know we talked to lots of other people too, but I'm just documenting my conversation and my interaction with Sam Friedman with the Alaska NewsMiner. I sent him an email afterwards, and it says 10 items of Schaeffer-related information. The first one is a letter from Russell Landers. Russell Landers wrote a letter to a friend of mine, and it mentions a 76-year-old man who overcame an attacker, and I gave him the attached file name. So let's go to Russell Landers. I just want to bring that up real quick. Give me just a second. Yeah, Russell Landers, letters. Today's, what was the date? Hold on, 12/6. As you can see, we got a lot of letters from Russell. 12/6. Okay, here we go. And the title was Tommy. All right, so this is going to be a long video. If you want to stick through it, you can. Now, if you read this letter here, you can see that Russell says, here, I'm now in my 17th day of being confined to our room. Sadly, it started when an angry fellow took the life of a Christian brother. That would be Robert David Neal. I've known for over 7 years. And I'm sorry, I'm too zoomed in. Okay, let's read this again. Sadly, it started when an angry fellow took the life of a Christian brother I've known for over 7 years and assaulted an elderly 76 Christian brother with, it appears, bad intent. By the grace of God, the elderly fellow was able to fend off the attacker, and other intended victims were spared. I know practically none of the answers. I don't know that next word. I can't read it. What do you guys think it says? Indiana. Why? This too will pass. All is in our Lord's hands. Okay, so that's what Russell had to say about the murder. So if we go back to my email, I also sent him the letter from Kurt Johnson, which is dated 12/02. So let's go to Kurt Johnson. Letters, 12/02. So here's what Kurt Johnson had to write. Hold on. Kurt said that, yeah, the murder and the attempted murder. Here he goes. By the time you get this letter should be By the time you get this letter, we should be off lockdown. The FBI will have finished their forensics of the crime scene. It will be interesting to see how a closed community of less than 40 deals with a murder and attempted murder. It might be a good case study for someone like me. So that was Kurt Johnson's recounting of the murder. And then we also have Schaeffer himself. We have documents from Schaeffer himself talking about the murder. Let me go to my folder here, CMU. We have his CMU Murder 1. Why is it not working? Let's do that again. Here we go. Schaeffer wrote, I'm injured, but a friend of mine is wounded. Another friend of mine is dead, and tensions are high. The Muslims attacked the Christians for having a Bible study. When I say this is a combat environment, I really mean it. Islam is the most warlike system of thought in the world has ever known. The West better be damn careful to never let these guys have a foothold in our culture. And then also we have this from Schaeffer. After finishing this letter, violence broke out against the Christians in the unit. My good friend is dead. Another close friend is badly wounded. I must go. I am needed. It's not over yet. So that was Schaeffer's recount. So we have Russell's recount of the murder, we have Kurt's recount of the murder, and we have Schaeffer's recount of the murder. Now we also have a guy by the name of Walter Bond. Hold on. Okay, this is Walter Bond. He's another prisoner in Terre Haute, Indiana. He said part of the postal mailed letter received from Walter Bond. Well, it's Saturday, the 10th of November, and the entire CMU is on lockdown. One person was stabbed. So the stabbing description comes from Walter Bond. And another murdered. I don't know how he was killed, but I saw his corpse as the coroner brought him down the stairs in front of the cells. They got the guy who did it, but I have no idea how long we will be on lockdown or what they, the administration, is going to do. This has never happened before here, but it doesn't surprise me. The two main groups in the CMU are Christian right-wing extremist and Muslim extremist. So I've sent Sam Friedman Russell Lander's letter. I think I said this already. Kurt Johnson, 2 accounts from Schaeffer and Walter Bond. Also, I talked to him about Congressman Steve Stockman and how the DOJ used the same illegal tactics that they did against Ted Stevens and Schaeffer Cox against Steve Stockman. I gave him an interview with Steve Stockman's wife, which if you want to listen to it, she's done many interviews. And if you want to listen to that interview, well, it's going to force me to watch a dang commercial. Hold on. If you want to listen to her interview, you can go find exclusive political prisoner Congressman Steve Stockman's wife, Patty Stockman interview. This is a great interview because you can see her face. And Sam Bushman with Liberty Roundtable also did an interview with Patty Stockman. And she's done several good interviews. Okay, so I sent Sam Friedman Steve Stockman's information, his main website, defendapatriot.com. Also, I sent him the Will Potter video about CMUs, the secret U.S. prisons you've never heard of before. And if you guys have not seen that, you guys need to go to this video and watch Will Potter talk about these secret prisons. This video has over 1.6 million views. And Schaeffer Cox is in the CMU prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. Then I sent him the video on Charles E. Samuels Jr. Okay? And if you guys have not seen this video, You need to see it because Robert David Neal, who was murdered in Indiana prison, CMU, had a legal action against Charles E. Samuels Jr., who was the BOP director. And you need to watch this video so you can understand the type of personality of Charles E. Samuels Jr. and just kind of what kind of person you're dealing with. So I sent him that. Also, I sent Sam Friedman my first phone call. It was 15 minutes in November of 2016 with Robert David Neal, who was murdered. And I sent him my, my other phone call. I think he called me a second time in January of 2017. And so that was only 8.5 minutes. I need to go back and refresh my memory on that. So I sent him both of my phone calls that we received from Robert David Neal, indicating that he had legal actions against Charles E. Samuels Jr., who's this guy right here. Then I sent him a Dropbox link. And that Dropbox link is this. And if you guys want all of this, I'll share it with you. But all of the information that I've ever received from Robert David Neal is in this Dropbox. And that includes pages and pages of his claims of abuse by the Bureau of Prisons and abuse by the Charles E. Samuels Jr. And he makes some very important claims about the illegal and the abusive and the just horrendous conditions of the CMU prisons. The next thing I sent him was the Walter Bond report, which I think I've already covered. That would be this video here, Walter Bond. And then the next thing I sent him was the Sidney Powell quote. And that quote is so important, I want you to hear it. So I'm going to play for you that quote, and I'm going to put my microphone on mute.
Hour, just the way you like us, fresh and independent. Our conversation with Sidney Powell continues. We were just talking about her book now being released in paperback. Sidney, we're also going to feature and link it on our website at BillMartinezLive.com. Licensed to Lie. Sidney, what is it that you want the readers ultimately to take away from your book, bottom line?
I want them to know that if the government wants to put you in prison, you will go to prison. It doesn't matter whether you're innocent or not. They will make up crimes against you. They will indict you. They will search your house. They're willing to make up evidence. They're willing to put pressure on witnesses to say whatever they want them to say. Anything. They will do anything to get you put into prison. We live in far more of a police state than anybody ever wanted to think we did. Look at what's happened to Congressman Steve Stockman. I've got his defense fund linked at creepsonamission.com. The same thing has happened to Paul Manafort, to a friend of mine here in Dallas, to lots of other people around the country, and it's happening more and more and more. We have got to get an attorney general who understands the need for criminal justice reform. I hope people will encourage their congressmen to pass the First Step Act. It is not going to let a lot of criminals loose on the streets who don't need to be there.
Okay, did you hear? Sidney Powell is the author of the book Licensed to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice. She's a former DOJ attorney. Listen to what she said. They will do anything to get you put into prison. I hope you guys picked up on that. Okay, and then number 10 is a video that I made where I say that Robert David Neal was likely murdered by the BOP and set up to be murdered by other prisoners. And murder in prison happens a lot more often than you think. Whitey Bulger was killed with a lock and a sock. Wesley Moore was killed with a lock and a sock. If the warden wants you to be killed, all he has to do is put you in the same vicinity as someone who has nothing to lose, that's spending life in prison, give a little incentive, and next thing you know, you're getting killed by a fellow prisoner. This man right here, his name is Hakeem Abdul Shahid, and he talks about torture in Marion CMU prison. Matter of fact, let me just bring that video up right now so you make sure you can find it. Hakeem Abdul Shahid, lest I be forgotten. It's right here. Now, this video is something you need to pay attention to because he talks about outright torture in Marion prison. And that's the same prison that Schaeffer Cox used to be in, and now he's in Terre Haute, Indiana. So I sent Sam Friedman with the NewsMiner, who's a reporter in Alaska, 10 different items to educate himself about what's going on. I did my best to represent Schaeffer, and what you're about to hear now is the full, unedited conversation that I had with Sam Friedman. And I pray that Sam Friedman represents the truth about the unjust incarceration and the railroading of Schaeffer Cox and his innocence. And I pray that the NewsMiner, instead of towing the government line, instead of carrying the narrative that Schaeffer is a dangerous militiaman who needs to be put in prison for 27 years, I pray that Sam Friedman starts to expose Joseph Bottini and Stephen Scrocky and Yvonne Lamouret and Judge Robert Bryan and the FBI agents who set up Schaeffer Cox with FBI informants who were motivated to lie. Matter of fact, one of them has written a book and is trying to profit off of the suffering of Schaeffer Cox. And one of those FBI agents, his name is FBI Special Agent Rick Sutherland. So I'm going to stop talking now, and here's the conversation that I had with the news reporter, that Sam Friedman. Hello, this is Rudy.
Hey Rudy, Sam Friedman here up in Fairbanks, Alaska. How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good. Would you have a few minutes to talk about Schaeffer? I'm working on an update.
Okay, and I just, help me out. Remember, you're Sam Friedman, but I drawing a blank. I apologize. I deal with so many different people.
No worries. This is Schaeffer Cox. I work for the newspaper in Fairbanks, where Schaeffer's from.
Okay, are you the Daily Miner, or which newspaper?
The Daily NewsMiner, that's the one.
All right. Yeah, I think you've had stories that have not necessarily been nice about Schaeffer, but I'm willing to talk to you.
Well, I'm not out to get him. I'm trying to give people an update on what's happening.
Okay.
So.
Well, you know, they banned me and my wife and some of my friends from communicating with Schaeffer, so I haven't had direct communication with him in a while, although I do still stay in touch with people that still can communicate with him. So I do have,
what's your question?
a fairly good update, but what's your question?
So the main thing I want to find out about, and I talked to Angela earlier this week, and Brian Christie is here in town, but the Larry Quayman thing is, and he's a pretty famous guy, so I'm interested in his taking on the case. But I'm trying to find out, I had heard that kind of third hand from I don't know if you know Frank Turney here in town, but I had heard third hand that Larry Quayman met with Schaeffer this week in Indiana. And I haven't been able to get a hold of Quayman, and I know he's a really busy guy.
That's my understanding.
Do you have any idea if that happened? Okay.
Yeah, that's my understanding is that's what's happened, but even more importantly than that, you're aware that Schaeffer's Christian friend, Robert David Neal, was murdered in that Terre Haute, Indiana prison on November the 10th.
I'm aware of that as well,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. And
there was also another death, although it's not clear to me if that's connected.
I wasn't aware of another death. I was aware of a 76-year-old Christian man who was stabbed, and the story that I heard was he overcame the attacker that had killed Robert David Neal, and that came from a letter from another prisoner, but they try to squelch the communication from inside that prison so much that it's hard to know what really happened,
Right.
But my understanding is that Larry Quayman did meet with Schaeffer this past week, and what came of that, I don't know. I don't have a communicating relationship with Larry Quayman.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask about, and I was familiar with the death there, and I want to look up the another name. There was another man. name of a man who was, I think, not in the CMU. See if I can find it really fast while I've got you on the phone.
You know that I have documents from Robert David Neal in a Dropbox that he had mailed to me, and we've also recorded a phone call from Robert David Neal about a year ago, and Robert David Neal says that he had only made 2 phone calls in 4 years, and one of them was to me, which I did record and put on YouTube, and it's all about legal action that Robert David Neal was taking against the BOP director, Charles E. Samuels Jr., and how he felt that legal action would be successful. And so it certainly leaves, suspicious motives around why Robert David Neal would be found dead in a prison. That, Warden J.R. Bell has responsibility for keeping everybody safe.
Right.
And if you haven't...
And where did you hear it was a stabbing?
There was a letter that came from either Russell Landers or Kurt Johnson. One of those two, who also, Kurt Johnson was recently moved to the CMU prison. And it was one of their letters that they had written, not to me because they've banned me. And I think that's illegal and unethical for them to ban me. But letters did make its way back to me. And in those letters, it indicated that this 76-year-old man had overcame the attacker that had murdered Robert David Neal, and he had gotten stabbed in the process. Now, the identity of this 76-year-old man is still yet to be known. I don't know who that is.
That's the stabber is the 67-year-old, 67-year-old?
No. The 76-year-old man overcame the attacker. The attacker was Muslim.
Oh, got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and in the event of overcoming the Muslim attacker, the 76-year-old man ends up getting stabbed, and he had already murdered Robert David Neal. And that was the gist of the story, as best I got it. Yeah, somebody else's recounting of it.
Got it. The other death I had seen when I was doing some Google searching, there was a man named Patrick McConnell who died November 23rd. But this is just the local news article there in Indiana. It's not clear if it was a homicide. It just says staff was called and began life-saving measures, and he died.
I have, for some reason it rings a bell, but I could be mixing it up with Patrick Hoffman. I just don't know anything about Patrick McConnell.
I'll email you this one as well.
Okay.
Anyone else you'd recommend? I want to figure out this. Hopefully I'll hear back from Quayman. I know he tends to has a reputation for liking publicity, so I wouldn't be surprised if he eventually gives me a call back. But I know he's also doing a bunch of giant national cases, which also, and that's why it got my attention that in the middle of the whole Mueller thing, he's traveling to Indiana to meet with Schaeffer. That I feel like that shows a pretty big commitment.
Yeah, well, I think Schaeffer's case is incredibly important, and there was a quote, I don't know if you're aware, but Sidney Powell, who's the author of the book License to Lie, she was an attorney for the Department of Justice for a long time. She recently put out a quote about the Steve Stockman case, which is another example of the DOJ going completely off the rails. But she said, if the DOJ and the FBI want to put you in prison, they will find a way to put you in prison. Whether they have to, search your home or use perjured testimony or make up evidence. I could get you the exact quote, but her being a former DOJ attorney, it was very powerful. And she even referenced the Steve Stockman case as an example of how they put political dissidents in prison to try to silence them. Are you familiar with Steve Stockman, by the way? He's a Texas congressman.
I will research it, but I'm not, no.
Yeah, I can send you information on that. Look up defendapatriot.com, defendapatriot.com, and I believe that the same DOJ tactics that were used on Schaeffer Cox have been used on Congressman Steve Stockman.
He got 10 years last
Got it.
week.
And he got 10 years. He got 10 years about a week ago. Very similar to what they did to Senator Ted Stevens as well.
Mm-hmm. That one I'm very familiar with.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the book Not Guilty by Rob.
I've read that book.
Rob Carey, right.
And I see that Schaeffer's FOIA case is actually now before, because it got moved from Illinois to, I don't, maybe it stopped in Indiana, but now it's in D.C. before Judge Emmett Sullivan.
No, Washington State.
Who I think was the judge in the Ted Stevens case.
Yeah, Emmett Sullivan, he slapped Joseph Bottini on the wrist, and but it was just a slap on the wrist. They still got to maintain their jobs, and nor were they ever held accountable for the false conviction or the illegal activities that brought about a false conviction for Senator Ted Stevens. So I don't have a whole lot of faith in Judge Emmett Sullivan, even though he appears to be fully aware of the illegal actions taken by Joseph Bottini and the Polar Pen team, the DOJ corrupt team that got a false conviction on Senator Ted Stevens. But if his FOIA case is before Emmett Sullivan, that we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. I hope Emmett Sullivan does the right thing. Schaeffer's going to be resentenced, I think, in May the 30th.
Right. No, I've got that on my calendar.
Yeah.
Rudy, the other thing I wanted to ask about was the effort to get a pardon. I saw there was a post. There was an effort to get the word out to Ivanka Trump when she was in Idaho. And Angela mentioned there was also something with the president's pastor. Do you know anything on the status of that?
No, I don't. I wouldn't know anything about that. I do know there are several pastors who support Schaeffer Cox and do have access to the White House. But one of them would be Pastor Wally Drake, who is a strong supporter of Schaeffer Cox, and another pastor, Pastor Stefan Broden in South Dallas, who ran for Congress himself, very prominent figure in the pro-life movement, was on the Glenn Beck radio program. And I go to his church regularly, and Pastor Stefan Broden, I think, recently visited the White House, but whether the topic of Schaeffer Cox came up, I couldn't tell you.
Got it. All right, Rudy, well, you've given me a lot to research, and I will send you this information about the, I don't know if it's connected at all.
Yeah, I would like
When I first heard about the death, the most recent one was this Patrick McConnell, but it also doesn't mention anything about the CMU or it being a homicide, but I know you're paying a lot of attention to that jail, and
yes, I certainly am.
News out of jails can be pretty slow sometimes, so it's another data point.
Yeah, I'll send you a video I made about Robert David Neal, and I'll confirm whose letter I read that indicated it was a 76-year-old man who overcame the Muslim attacker and got stabbed himself. It was either Kurt Johnson or Russell Landers, both of whom are Christians, and both of whom are residing in the Terre Haute, Indiana prison. Have you seen the TED Talks, Will Potter's video that he put out about the CMU prisons? And just curious?
I have not.
You might want to watch that. I'm going to send you a couple of other videos that he talks about CMU prisons in our country. Of course, one is in Marion, Illinois, and one is in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Right,
and for Schaeffer to be in those prisons is, I consider, a huge, another travesty of justice, because it shows that, they're concerned about the truth that he has to speak, and they got to limit his communications. And I have been told that they did take away his communications after the Clayman visit, which is another evidence that they just simply don't want Schaeffer to be able to communicate to the public, which I think is wrong. I think it's a terrible tragedy. So I'll get you some additional information, and if you choose to use it, I pray that you do.
All right, good talking to you, Rudy.
Okay, take care. God bless.
Take care.